A crazed maniac kills a teen for his political beliefs, admits it, and is now already out on bail, according to LifeSite. Court docs say Shannon Brandt told 911 dispatchers he intentionally used his SUV to kill the victim, Kayler Ellingson, because he was a Republican extremist. Is it any coincidence Brandt seems to feel justified soon after President Biden's inflammatory speech pitting half the country against his opposition? And Biden is doubling down.
I'm here at a Democratic rally. We're making real progress. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act to bring down costs, the bipartisan infrastructure law to rebuild America, the American Rescue Plan to bring our economy back, and so much more. But the extreme MAGA Republicans want to take it all back.
This message just days after a politically motivated murder of a Republican teen. You'd think in today's politically charged environment, the targeting and killing of a young man based solely on his beliefs would be big news. But that would disrupt the MSM narrative that it's the right who are the violent ones. Newsbusters, a review of news coverage on left-wing broadcasts, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and MSNBC, revealed that none of these networks have given the attack even 1 second of airtime. And here's Comfortably Smug on Twitter. Over 20 New York Times stories over the past month mentioned political violence. 0 mentions of Kayler Ellingson, the only American who has been murdered in an act of political violence in that time. Bringing you what's ignored, sensationalized, misleading, or just plain false, here's your media malfeasance for the week. A former Fox producer is blowing the whistle on conflicts of interest at the network. WND shares Brianna Morello says she left Fox when the corporation forced employees to receive the needle and claims the network was paid by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to promote the jabs on the air. Isn't true journalism supposed to be examining conflicts of interest and motivations, investigating, holding big corporations accountable? Instead, the whistleblower says Fox was taking money and acting more like a public relations firm. Also this week, MSM propaganda puppets still seem to care more about 50 migrants flown to Martha's Vineyard than about immigrants dying from crossing the border under the current federal policies.
Only the federal government can deport illegals, but we need somebody to stand up, do it for the people. How they break the law and get away, how that's equal. And then give them my tax dollars, now how that ain't evil.
Daily Caller, the Eagle Pass Fire Department is requesting refrigerators for bodies as morgues are overwhelmed. Authorities say they're collecting about 30 bodies a month from drowned immigrants. Politico notes Dems pushed DOJ to probe DeSantis over migrants. But why were they silent when President Joe Biden was flying illegal immigrants overnight across the country? Someone who has not been silent about what's going on at the border is Fox's Bill Melugin. Politico. As Melugin has become an increasingly visible figure on the network, his coverage has caught the attention of the White House, which has become increasingly irritated by his reporting. But now they have a Democrat Texas sheriff who says he's investigating DeSantis for the crime of...
I don't know.
Well, it turns out this sheriff that seems to care an awful lot about immigrants transported to an area that has claimed to be welcoming to migrants didn't care enough about immigrants' lives. He's the same sheriff that allowed 53 migrants to die in a semi-truck, according to 100% Fed Up. Governor DeSantis responds.
I saw somebody on CNN try to say, sending 50 illegal aliens to wealthy Martha's Vineyard is reminiscent of the Holocaust. And I just thought to myself, has the world gone totally mad? I mean, these are voluntary transportation that they're signing up for. But
however, Sheriff Salazar must have had a moment of clarity because he rejects the VP's assertion that the border is secure.
I would beg to differ. I don't think the border is as secure as what folks are maybe telling them. With that being said, I think there's some solutions to be had, but it's going to start with somebody from D.C. making the trip down here and talking to us.
So what's the motivation here? Well, we find out this week that Judiciary Democrats voted to support non-citizens voting in our elections. Another thing to ponder, who is leading our country right now? The White House had to walk back at least a couple things President Biden said in an interview with 60 Minutes.
If in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
After our interview, a White House official told us U.S. policy has not changed. Officially, the U.S. will not say whether American forces would defend Taiwan, but the commander-in-chief had a view of his own.
So unlike Ukraine, to be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion?
Yes.
An obvious follow-up question was skipped when Biden said this.
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over.
So if the pandemic is over, why haven't emergency powers been halted? Kentucky Representative Thomas Massey addressed what the reporter would not. If the pandemic is over, as Biden says, then all of the president's emergency powers predicated on a pandemic, all COVID vax mandates, the emergency powers of every governor, emergency use authorizations, and the PrEP Act should all be voided tomorrow. Despite CNN acting like it's making efforts to be less biased, Don Lemon tries to weasel identity politics into an interview with a royal commentator, and this happens.
And so on. And then you have those who are asking for reparations for colonialism, and they're wondering, you know, $100 billion, $24 billion here and there, $500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you are, you know, you have all of this vast wealth? Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And when across the entire world, when the slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery? The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British. In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them. And I think you're totally right. If reparations need to be paid, we need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages. Absolutely. That's where they should start. And maybe, I don't know, the descendants of those families where they died in the high seas trying to stop the slavery, that those families should receive something too, I think, at the same time.
It's an interesting discussion, Hillary. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll continue to discuss in the future.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
But CNN shouldn't even try to be fair, according to Tom Jones from the Poynter Institute, which laughably still claims to teach journalism ethics and leadership. He penned, CNN hewing toward the center is not necessarily good for our democracy. Pushing for fairness and completeness in journalism is never a bad idea, but presenting both sides sometimes can be. Jones, first of all, the U.S. is most accurately defined as a constitutional republic. And second, how dare you claim to know anything about journalism ethics and then demand a news network stick with giving only one side? Helping to bring balance back to journalism by exposing the scales tipped heavily in favor of the propaganda puppet mainstream, I'm Christy Lee. Follow me at freenews.news and join my locals community at ChristyLeeTV.locals.com.